Hey, this is Matt from Rosetta, and you're listening to Metalurgia.
The beginning, I just want to ask you about the genre. How would you describe this genre of music that you're playing to the people that don't know you, that want just to know what you are playing and to get to inside your music?
I think to a lot of people, at first, we just come across as a metal band. But I think that we're sitting in a space that's sort of in between metal, post-rock, and drone music. And in some ways, that's because those are areas that have influenced us heavily. And, you might find that for me, for example, drone is a really important element in my background, whereas for some of the other guys, metal and hardcore might be more important. Like for Armine, our singer, hardcore is a huge part of what he grew up listening to. And then there's, kind of these space and post-rock influences, and a lot of 90s rock, similar to Slint and Mogwai and bands like that, was really influential for us when we were growing up. So we're kind of just sitting at an intersection point between a lot of those different things.
You're living very exhausting lifestyle. With in this year, you are releasing some reeditions, physical reeditions, and one compilation. Do you have some time to live a private life?
I think, well, we all have to work because we don't live off the band. It's not a full-time occupation. So the band kind of self-sustains. It takes care of itself, but we all have to have jobs to support ourselves outside of that. So one of the things we've tried to do is to confine our touring to just one part of the year. So we try not to be on tour for more than, say, 10, 12, 14 weeks out of an entire year. So it leaves a fair amount of time for us to be writing new music and recording and taking care of other things that are going on in our lives. So I think it's important to maintain a balance in that way. I think if you're in a band and you're on tour for 200 days out of the year, it's too much and you burn out very, very quickly, and there's not enough time to actually develop a sound, put out a lot of records, stick around for a long time. And I think that early in the life of the band, we expected to be on tour more. We expected to be on tour 200 days out of the year, but then as time went on, we realized that it was more important to keep a balance between those things. And we've been together now for 13 years, and no one has left the band. And I think that the reason for that is because we were able to maintain some balance in the amount of time that we spent on it.
We are living in the world when where everything is digitalized, and you're releasing some physical stuff, vinyls, like CDs. What is the main thing? What do you think? Why people still are buying this stuff?
I think the reason that digital music has done well is because it's convenient. But I think that for people who don't just want background music, they want something to be invested in and to connect deeply with, it actually really helps to be able to hold something. And I think the resurgence in vinyl has a lot to do with the fact that the format is very large, and so it's not just that it's something you can hold, it's something that's really big, and in a lot of cases, the vinyl itself is colored and the record is too big, so it has to go on 2 LPs, so there's this large package, and it's a lot more expensive to make all of that than it is to make a CD. Which is in turn more expensive than it is to just put something up on the internet. But people are willing to pay for that because I think they want to have something tangible, and I recognize that's important. That being said, though, I have to acknowledge that the majority of the money that comes in from our recordings comes in from digital. It's from downloads and streaming primarily, and that's many, many times more than what we would make on CDs and vinyl. Some of that is because CDs and vinyl are expensive, but a lot of it is just that there's plenty of people who don't care about physical media. But we've always felt like for the people who do care about it, we wanted it to be available. So we self-release digital and then we will contract out with small labels. Typically 6 months to a year after a release comes out digitally, we'll have a CD or a vinyl version. And actually this fall, Quintessential Ephemera and the Anesthete are coming out on cassette from a label in Greece, and that's the first time we've ever had releases out on cassette.
You are releasing some of your stuff by your own. Some time ago, I had an opportunity to speak with an artist that is releasing all of his work on by his own, and he told me that if he could get to the point when he started it, he wouldn't be doing this. And what, in your opinion, are the pros and cons of releasing by themselves? Why do you achieve by releasing by your own?
The pros really, well, so again, it depends. I mean, the answer is always it depends. But I think for a band of our size, where we've been around for a long time, we have a fairly consistent fan base, and our fans are generous and they're reliable and they buy our new releases, things like that. There's actually more money to be made by self-releasing if you're an established band than there is by releasing on a label. If you're a brand new band, that it might not be true. It might be better to be on a label because then the label can help you get exposure and things like that. We had already been on a label for almost 10 years by the time we decided to start self-releasing. So for us, money-wise, it made sense to self-release because it cut out middleman and allowed us to keep more of the money that was coming in. But apart from that, I think it's a huge benefit to have control over your own release schedule. So instead of having to fit your release in among 12 others that a label is doing in a year, you can say, well, this is the best time, this is when it's going to be finished, we're going to put it out on this date, and there's nobody to tell you that you can't do that. So from that perspective, having the control over the entire arc of the release cycle, the whole process of booking the tours around it, when it's going to come out, the production, everything else related to that, that's really nice. But then obviously the downside of that is that there's so much more work that you have to do than if you were on a label. You don't have someone who is just taking care of PR. You don't have someone who's just taking care of production, who's booking the tour for you so that you don't have to think about that. You have to do all of those things yourself. And it takes up a lot of time and it's a lot of effort. And then you have to learn how to do all of that as well. So I think there's a certain amount of time required to figure things out and move forward with that. I mean, for us, it's, again, I don't know if other bands' fans are as committed as ours are. Every time we put something out, I'm surprised at how excited and generous and committed our listeners are, and they have taken very, very good care of us over the last few years.
As I said before, you're releasing a compilation this year, and what was the key of choosing songs to this compilation?
We wanted to, well, we had a bunch of remixes that had only come out in Japan, and we wanted those remixes to be available to people all over the world instead of just on those Japan edition CDs. And then we had a few shows, I think, well, really only 2 shows. We've had 2 shows in the United States where we played quiet, instrumental, no vocals, and we reinterpreted a lot of our old songs into these very, very quiet, droney, spacey sort of pieces that were very clean sounding. We wanted to record a few of those and put them out so that people could hear them if they hadn't had a chance to be at those shows. And then obviously there was a large catalog of old demos and unreleased material from the early days. There was an acoustic version of Ope Natal from Galilean Satellites that people had been requesting over and over and over again. That had only ever been on our MySpace probably 10 years ago at this point. And so we felt like, well, we need to have some sort of release that we can collect all of these things on. And I think it felt right because we began working on that just after the 10th anniversary of the release of Galilean Satellites. So it had been 10 years since we put out our first album, and it seemed like, okay, it's time for something to look back, reflect a little bit, think about what it is that we've done during that period of time, and put a different spin on it by reinterpreting some of those old songs and giving people a sort of a different format to be able to experience something old but make it new again.
It's been 4 years since your last split. Do you have some bands that you would like to play with in that kind of release?
Yeah, we actually we were recently talking with Sleep Makes Waves from Australia. We've been friends with them for a long time and have played with them. And you know, they're a very, very busy band, so it's difficult to get schedules to line up. But we would love to do something with them. And then we'd also had hoped to be able to do something with Amun-Ra at some point. And Armine has a relationship with those guys and also with the label Consoling Sounds, which is based in Ghent in Belgium. And so we've been talking about that for a little bit too. But again, it's always, the reason it's been so long since our last split is just that all the bands that we're friends with are so busy that it's difficult to find time to actually have the bands write something specifically for a split release, be able to record it, go through the whole production process, that sort of thing. But we haven't given up on it. We would still like to do it.
Rosetta is a 5-member band, and how looks decision-making process? Do you have some hard times with making decisions?
I think even when we only had 4 members, it was a very democratic process. We've always thought of it as a consensus model instead of a democracy. So instead of voting on decisions, we just keep talking about them until everyone agrees. And we've done almost everything that way since the band began. So when we added a 5th member, that means that making decisions takes a little bit longer because there's another person who needs to agree. But we've been consistent about getting consensus. Just we keep talking about things until we find common ground and people can agree on things. So of course there's conflict. There's conflict in every band. But I think for us, because we have remained committed to that model and we've seen it work well over the last 13 years, there just was no reason to change it. And you know, our 5th member, Eric, he's been friends with us for a long, long time, much longer than he's been in the band. And really the main reason that we asked him to be in the band was that we had known him for a long time. We're friends with him. We were comfortable with his musical background and felt that he had a lot to contribute. And I think that's turned out to be true.
I think that your music is made to be played in clubs, but you're also playing in festivals. And do you have some different approaches when you are playing on open air festivals rather than playing in the clubs?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with stage backline and equipment choices and things like that. And so when you're on a big stage, so much more of sounding large is up to the sound engineer. It's up to your stage crew. And so I think from that perspective, it's like you just need to be. We actually will use less equipment for a large festival than we would in a club, because in a club we want people to hear the amps on the stage. We want to fill the room with the sound from the stage and use the PA just to support that. And but when you're on a huge stage, obviously, like, people out in the audience can't even really hear the amps on the stage. So you're totally dependent on the front of house engineer to do a good job. And in that situation, it's actually best to use less, to approach it with a more minimal mindset, and to just be very, very clear with the engineer about what you need. And honestly, we've had really, really positive experiences playing festivals just by being as clear as we can, trusting the engineer to know what they're doing, and, you know, it hasn't been a problem for us. I think maybe the trade-off of playing large festivals that feels weird to me is that I do like for the audience to be close, and I like to be able to interact with them directly. And so when you're at a festival and there's all this space between you and the crowd, that can be a little bit difficult to try to experience that relationship or build a rapport with the audience. But it's still fun. It's always fun to play for people who are excited. So
it's not your first time here in Poland, if I'm guessing right. And do you have some memories connected with Poland?
yeah, actually, the first show that we ever played in Europe was in Wrocław at Firle in 2009, I believe. So we had toured the U.S. a bunch of times. We had actually toured Australia already, but we'd never been to Europe. So our first show in Europe was at Firle, and I guess this is now our fifth tour of Europe, and every time we come back to Poland, the crowds are very enthusiastic, and I think, to some extent, um, audiences in Eastern Europe, where there has been more of a history of conflict in the last few decades, seem to have a deeper appreciation for highly emotional and intense music. And I think more Western audiences, North American or Western European audiences, don't necessarily have that kind of visceral connection to the music that Eastern European audiences do. So there is something unique about that, and I think we've grown to appreciate that fans are sort of uninhibited and very expressive about interacting with the music. And so it's not just that they're excited and enthusiastic, it just seems like there's a heart level connection there that's something that we haven't encountered in other places, and that has kept us coming back over time.
What could we expect of you after this tour?
Well, so we're working on a new record. We've already begun to write songs. We have the skeletons of 2 new songs for a new full length. So I think we're gonna finish out this year doing a few extra tours. Like, we're gonna try to go to Russia. We're gonna try to go to Japan before the end of the year, possibly Canada, and then really 2017 we're gonna spend most of the time writing and recording a new album. And I don't know. It's too early to say when that would come out, but hopefully end of 2017 or early 2018 there would be a new full-length album coming out.
Do you have something to say in the end of this interview?
Not really, just that I'm excited to be on tour and I'm excited to play the show. So
Thank you very much for the interview, and see you on the stage.
all right.